The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Marcus pushed his cart down the executive corridor at 3 in the morning. Meridian Corp's headquarters stood silent, except for the distant hum of computers and the soft squeak of his wheels on polished marble. He had perfected the art of invisibility during these late hours, moving through the building like a ghost among the remnants of corporate ambition. Tonight felt different. As he approached the main conference room, voices drifted through the partially open door. Sarah Meridian's voice carried strain and exhaustion as she spoke into her phone. Marcus slowed his pace, not to eavesdrop, but because something in her tone made him pause. "I understand the deadline, but this feels rushed," Sarah was saying. "A $10 billion acquisition shouldn't be decided in 48 hours. Marcus continued his work, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces, but his trained mind couldn't help processing what he heard. Titan Industries. Hostile takeover. Emergency board meeting. The words triggered memories of his former life, when he had lived and breathed merger analysis. He noticed the scattered documents on the conference table. Financial projections, legal briefs, acquisition terms. His eyes swept across familiar formatting and corporate language. Even upside down, he could read the key figures and immediately recognize several red flags that would have made him advise any client to run. Sarah ended her call and rubbed her temples. She looked up as Marcus quietly worked around her, their eyes meeting briefly. He saw the weight of inherited responsibility, the burden of protecting not just the company, but the hundreds of families who depended on it. "Long night," she said simply. Marcus nodded respectfully and continued his work. "They usually are when big decisions need making," he replied softly. As he moved to the next room, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was watching a disaster unfold in slow motion. The next evening brought an unwelcome energy to Meridian Corp's usually peaceful halls. Marcus arrived to find the executive floor buzzing with activity despite the late hour. Black sedans lined the curved driveway, and men in expensive suits moved through the building with predatory confidence. Richard Blackstone had arrived. Marcus recognized him immediately from the business magazines that occasionally found their way into break room trash bins. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of aggressive charisma that commanded boardrooms and crushed competition. He strode through the lobby flanked by a team of lawyers and financial advisors, treating the building as if he already owned it. "Where's the Meridian woman?" Blackstone's voice carried down the hallway as Marcus began his rounds. "We need to wrap this up tonight. My people don't have time for her emotional hand-wringing." Marcus moved methodically through his duties, invisible to the corporate invasion happening around him. He watched Blackstone dismiss a longtime Meridian employee with a wave of his hand when she tried to offer refreshments. The man's contempt for everyone below his perceived level was palpable. In the main conference room, Blackstone spread out documents like a general planning a siege. His lawyers flanked him as Sarah Meridian entered, looking composed but tense. The contrast was stark. Her family business versus his corporate empire, her careful consideration versus his rushed aggression. "Sarah, darling," Blackstone said with false warmth, "let's not overcomplicate this. My offer is generous, and frankly, it's the only lifeline you're going to get." As Marcus emptied wastebaskets around the room's perimeter, he heard the subtle threats wrapped in business language. Blackstone wasn't just making an offer. He was orchestrating a conquest, using pressure tactics that would have made Marcus's former colleagues cringe. The predator had arrived, and Marcus could see the trap being set. After midnight, when the executives finally departed, Marcus found himself alone with the scattered remnants of corporate warfare. The conference room table was littered with documents, coffee cups, and the detritus of high-stakes negotiation. But for someone with his background, it was a treasure trove of information. Marcus began his cleaning routine, but his eyes were drawn to the acquisition proposal left carelessly open. Years of merger analysis had trained him to read documents quickly, extracting key information even while performing other tasks. As he wiped down the table, his trained eye caught details that made his stomach tighten. The debt-to-equity ratios were structured to bankrupt Meridian within 18 months. Hidden in subsection 12 of the employment clause was language that would allow Titan to terminate 90% of the workforce within 60 days of closing. Most damaging of all, the intellectual property transfer would strip Meridian of patents worth 3 times the acquisition price. Marcus paused, spray bottle in hand, staring at numbers that told a story of systematic destruction. This wasn't an acquisition. It was a dismantling operation designed to eliminate a competitor while stealing their most valuable assets. He thought of the employees he passed each night. Martha, in accounting, who kept photos of her grandchildren on her desk. Tom from security, working overtime to pay for his son's college tuition. The young programmers in research and development, excited about projects they believed would secure their futures. None of them knew they were being sold into corporate servitude. Marcus continued cleaning, but his mind was racing through the legal implications. The SEC disclosure requirements alone had been violated in at least 4 different ways. The environmental liability transfers would expose Meridian to decades of lawsuits. Every page revealed another carefully hidden trap. By the time he finished the room, Marcus had memorized the document's most crucial flaws. The question wasn't whether he could expose them. The question was whether he should risk everything to do it. Marcus arrived home as dawn painted the sky pale pink, his mind still churning with what he had discovered. Emma was already awake, sitting at their small kitchen table with her cereal bowl, dressed in her school uniform with her backpack ready by the door. "You look worried, Daddy," she said, studying his face with the unnerving perception that 80-year-olds sometimes possessed. Did something bad happen at work? Marcus poured himself coffee and sat across from her, marveling at how she could read him so easily. "Just some grown-up problems, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about." Emma stirred her cereal thoughtfully. "Mrs. Johnson says that when we see something wrong happening, we should tell a teacher or a grown-up who can help fix it." "That's good advice," Marcus replied, wondering if his daughter somehow sensed the weight of his dilemma. "But what if the grown-up who could fix it doesn't know it's wrong?" Emma asked. "Like if someone was being mean to a kid on the playground, but the teacher couldn't see it happening?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Then sometimes, if you're sure about what you saw, you have to be brave and tell the teacher anyway. Even if it's scary." Emma nodded solemnly. "Because doing the right thing is more important than being scared." After dropping Emma at school, Marcus drove through the city thinking about his daughter's innocent wisdom. She had no idea that her simple moral clarity had illuminated his path forward. In her 80-year-old world, right and wrong were still clear-cut concepts, uncomplicated by fear of consequences or considerations of personal cost. He thought about the hundreds of families who would lose their livelihoods if Blackstone's plan succeeded. He thought about Sarah Meridian, drowning in pressure and unaware of the trap closing around her company. Emma was right. Doing the right thing was more important than being scared. When Marcus arrived for his shift that evening, the atmosphere at Meridian Corp had grown noticeably tenser. Blackstone had returned with reinforcements, additional lawyers, financial analysts, and what appeared to be a team of corporate restructuring specialists. Their presence filled the executive floor with an air of impending doom. Marcus observed the staff's reactions as he moved through the building. Longtime employees whispered in corners, their faces etched with worry. The rumors had begun circulating. Massive layoffs, facility closures, pension fund raids. While none of them knew the specific details Marcus had uncovered, they could sense the predatory nature of what was happening. In the main conference room, Blackstone had Sarah cornered. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see the CEO's increasingly desperate body language as Blackstone's team presented what they called time-sensitive opportunities. "Sarah, my dear," Blackstone's voice carried into the hallway as Marcus worked nearby. "Market conditions won't wait for your sentimentality. Sign tonight, or watch your company collapse in 6 months when the next quarterly report destroys your stock price." The threat was barely veiled. Marcus could see Sarah's hands trembling as she reviewed documents, the weight of generations of family legacy pressing down on her shoulders. Her father had built this company from nothing, and now she was being pressured to sign it away to save it. Blackstone's financial projections were deliberately misleading, designed to paint a picture of inevitable failure without his intervention. Marcus recognized the tactics from his former career: create artificial urgency, present false dichotomies, exploit emotional vulnerability. It was corporate manipulation at its most ruthless. As the evening wore on, the pressure intensified. Blackstone's team took turns presenting dire scenarios and miraculous solutions, all leading to the same conclusion: surrender control to Titan Industries or face certain destruction. Marcus watched Sarah's resolve weakening with each passing hour, knowing that by morning, she might be desperate enough to sign away everything her family had built. The critical negotiation session began at 11 p.m., when Blackstone gathered his full team for what he called the final push. Marcus found himself cleaning the conference room adjacent to the main meeting space, separated only by a glass partition that had been hastily covered with presentation boards. Through gaps in the makeshift privacy screen, Marcus could observe the psychological warfare unfolding. Blackstone had arranged his team strategically: lawyers flanking Sarah's position, financial analysts presenting charts designed to induce panic, and acquisition specialists who spoke in terms of inevitable market doom. "Look at these projections, Sarah," Blackstone commanded, his voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "Your Q3 numbers are already soft. By Q4, you'll be hemorrhaging money. By next year, bankruptcy becomes not just possible, but probable." Marcus continued his methodical cleaning, invisible to the corporate predators focused on their prey. He could see the manufactured crisis clearly: selective data presentation, worst-case scenario modeling, and strategic omission of Meridian's actual strengths. It was a masterclass in corporate intimidation. Sarah's voice grew smaller with each exchange. "I need time to consult with our board, our advisors." "Time is exactly what you don't have," Blackstone interrupted. "My offer expires at dawn. Accept it tonight, or watch your company die slowly over the next 18 months. The ultimatum hung in the air like a threat. Marcus watched Sarah's shoulders sag under the weight of impossible choices: sign away her family's legacy or risk destroying it through inaction. Blackstone had engineered the perfect trap, leaving her feeling cornered and desperate. As Marcus emptied waste baskets and wiped surfaces, he remained perfectly invisible to the executives. They saw only a janitor, someone beneath their notice, irrelevant to their billion-dollar maneuvering. Their dismissal of his presence would soon become their greatest mistake. The moment of truth was approaching, and Marcus could feel the weight of Emma's words. Doing the right thing was more important than being scared. As Marcus moved closer to empty the wastebasket near the conference table, Blackstone's attention suddenly fixed on him with predatory annoyance. The corporate shark had been interrupted in the middle of his feeding frenzy by what he perceived as a mere distraction. "Excuse me," Blackstone snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "We're conducting sensitive business here. Can't your janitorial duties wait until we're finished?" Marcus paused, meeting Blackstone's gaze calmly. "I apologize for the interruption. I'll finish quickly and leave you to your meeting." "No, you'll leave now," Blackstone commanded, standing to his full, imposing height. "Do you have any idea what kind of money is being discussed in this room? This is $10 billion of corporate strategy, not something for the cleaning staff to overhear." The dismissal was absolute and humiliating, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who viewed service workers as barely human. Blackstone's team smirked at their leader's display of dominance, while Sarah looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "Security should have cleared this floor," Blackstone continued, addressing Sarah as if Marcus weren't even present. "I don't want minimum wage employees lurking around during confidential negotiations. God knows what they might overhear or misunderstand." Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies with quiet dignity, his face betraying nothing of the storm building inside him. 20 years of corporate experience, advanced degrees in business and law, expertise in merger analysis that could have saved or destroyed companies worth hundreds of billions, and Blackstone saw only a janitor to be dismissed. "Of course, sir," Marcus replied respectfully. "I'll make sure to stay clear of the area." As he moved toward the door, Marcus could hear Blackstone's triumphant return to the negotiation. "Now, Sarah, where were we? Ah, yes, your signature on page 47. The moment of ultimate contempt had arrived. Blackstone's arrogance had just sealed his fate, though he would never see it coming. Marcus stood outside the conference room for exactly 30 seconds, watching through the glass as Blackstone positioned the signature page in front of Sarah. Her pen hovered uncertainly over the document that would surrender her family's legacy to a corporate predator. The weight of generations pressed down on her shoulders as Blackstone's team closed in like vultures. Emma's voice echoed in his mind. Doing the right thing was more important than being scared. Marcus quietly opened the conference room door and stepped inside. The executives barely glanced up, assuming he had forgotten something in his haste to obey Blackstone's dismissal. Sarah's pen was moving toward the paper when Marcus spoke, his voice calm and measured. "Ms. Meridian, before you sign that document, you should know that subsection 12 violates federal employment protection statutes." The room went silent. Blackstone's head snapped up, his face flushing with rage at the janitor's audacity. "I told you to leave. Security." But Marcus continued, his voice steady and professional. "The intellectual property transfer in Section 19 is structured to avoid SEC disclosure requirements, which constitute securities fraud under federal law." Sarah's pen stopped moving. The legal precision of Marcus's language cut through the room's tension like a blade. These weren't the words of a minimum wage employee stumbling through concepts beyond his understanding. The debt restructuring clauses will trigger automatic bankruptcy provisions within 18 months, making this acquisition a fraudulent conveyance under federal bankruptcy code. Blackstone stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. The casual dismissal in his eyes was replaced by something approaching shock. The janitor he had so contemptuously dismissed was speaking with the expertise of a seasoned corporate attorney. "Who the hell are you?" Blackstone whispered. Marcus met his gaze with quiet dignity. "Someone who recognizes a predatory acquisition when he sees one." The single sentence hung in the air, loaded with implications that would change everything. The silence stretched like a held breath. Blackstone's carefully constructed facade of corporate dominance cracked as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. His team of lawyers exchanged nervous glances, suddenly uncertain about documents they had crafted with predatory precision. "You're bluffing," Blackstone said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "You're a janitor. You couldn't possibly understand the complexities of corporate law." Marcus stepped closer to the conference table, his posture shifting from invisible service worker to confident professional. Section 548 of the Federal Bankruptcy Code defines fraudulent transfers as transactions intended to hinder, delay, or defraud creditors. Your debt restructuring creates exactly that scenario. Sarah looked up from the signature page, her pen still frozen in place. For the first time in hours, hope flickered in her eyes as she realized someone might actually understand what was happening to her company. The Delaware Corporate Code requires full disclosure of material adverse effects. Marcus continued, his voice gaining strength. Your acquisition deliberately conceals the fact that Meridian's patents are worth 3 times your offer price. That's securities fraud. Blackstone's lead attorney leaned forward, studying Marcus with new interest. How do you know about the patent valuations? Those were confidential assessments. Because, Marcus said quietly, I wrote the original IP strategy that created those patent portfolios. I also structured the initial public offering that took Meridian Corp public 15 years ago. The revelation hit the room like a physical blow. Sarah's eyes widened as pieces of a puzzle suddenly clicked into place. The janitor who had worked quietly in their building for 2 years wasn't just observant. He was the architect of some of their company's most valuable assets. Blackstone's face went pale as he realized his contemptuous dismissal had just exposed him to someone who knew exactly how to dismantle his predatory scheme. The hunter had become the hunted, and he never saw it coming. Sarah set down her pen and looked directly at Marcus for the first time, seeing him not as invisible help, but as the man who might have just saved her company. "Marcus Chun," she said slowly, recognition dawning. "You're Marcus Chun. You were the lead counsel on our IPO. You structured our international expansion." Marcus nodded quietly. "I was also the one who recommended the patent protection strategy that's now worth over $30 billion in intellectual property." Blackstone's aggressive composure finally shattered completely. His voice cracked with fury and disbelief. "This is impossible. You're a janitor. You clean floors. I clean floors because I needed steady work with health insurance after my wife died." Marcus replied with calm dignity. "My daughter needed stability, not corporate politics and 80-hour weeks. But that doesn't mean I stopped understanding merger law." The room's dynamic had shifted entirely. Blackstone's team huddled in whispered consultation while their predatory acquisition fell apart before their eyes. The carefully crafted deception lay exposed by someone they had dismissed as beneath their notice. "Every clause in your acquisition agreement violates federal disclosure requirements," Marcus continued, his expertise flowing like water through a broken dam. "The employment termination provisions violate WARN Act notification standards. The pension fund transfers constitute fiduciary breach under ERISA. Any judge would void this contract within hours of filing." Sarah stood up, her confidence returning as she realized the trap she had almost fallen into. "Mr. Blackstone, I think this meeting is over." "You can't do this," Blackstone snarled, his mask of corporate civility completely abandoned. "I'll destroy your company through legitimate market competition." Marcus smiled quietly. "Good luck with that. But you might want to consult with Securities Counsel before your next quarterly report. I noticed some interesting discrepancies in your own financial filings." Blackstone's face went white as the threat sank in. The janitor he had dismissed wasn't just defending Meridian. He was positioning for a counterattack. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat in the executive conference room, where everything had changed. This time, he wore a tailored suit instead of janitor's coveralls, and Sarah Meridian sat across from him with a contract of a very different nature. "Chief Legal Officer and Vice President of Strategic Development," Sarah said, sliding the employment agreement across the polished table. "I should have recognized your value years ago, Marcus. I'm sorry it took a crisis to open my eyes." Marcus reviewed the terms with the same careful attention he had once given to cleaning schedules. The salary was generous, the benefits comprehensive, but most importantly, the position offered flexible hours that would let him be present for Emma's school events and bedtime stories. Blackstone's acquisition attempt turned into a SEC investigation. Sarah continued with satisfaction. His company's stock price dropped 40% when the fraud allegations became public. Sometimes justice does prevail. That evening, Marcus picked up Emma from school in his new position, but with the same priorities. She climbed into the car with her usual enthusiasm, chattering about her day before noticing his different clothes. "You look fancy, Daddy," she observed. "Did something good happen at work?" "Something very good," Marcus replied, thinking about Hiddenworth finally being recognized. "It turns out that when you do the right thing, even when it's scary, good things can happen." Emma nodded seriously. "Mrs. Johnson says that too. She says heroes aren't people who aren't scared, but people who do the right thing even when they are scared." As they drove home, Marcus reflected on the unexpected journey from invisible janitor to valued executive. His expertise had never disappeared. It had simply been overlooked by people who judged worth by appearance rather than character. Sometimes the most powerful voice in the room belonged to the person everyone assumed had nothing important to say. If this story of hidden expertise and recognition moved you, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, or if you've ever witnessed someone's true abilities being overlooked in your own life. The security guard barely looked up as Marcus Chun badged into Meridian Corp at midnight, his cleaning cartwheels squeaking softly against the marble lobby floor. For 2 years, he had been invisible in this building, moving through executive suites and conference rooms like a ghost among the remnants of corporate power. Marcus adjusted his blue uniform shirt and began his methodical journey to the 15th floor. The elevator hummed quietly as it carried him past darkened offices where million-dollar decisions were made by people who would never notice the man who emptied their trash bins and wiped their conference tables clean. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you've seen similar corporate drama where you're from. At 38, Marcus had perfected the art of invisibility. His movements were efficient and practiced as he unlocked supply closets and prepared for another night of maintaining spaces where he once belonged. The irony wasn't lost on him that he now cleaned the very building where he had once commanded respect as a senior corporate attorney. His phone buzzed with a text from his babysitter. "Emma asleep by 9. Finished math homework. Sweet dreams, Mr. Chun." Marcus smiled, thinking of his 80-year-old daughter tucked safely in bed. Everything he did now was for her. Every late-night shift and early morning sacrifice motivated by a father's fierce love. As he pushed his cart down the executive corridor, Marcus caught his reflection in the polished windows. The man staring back wore janitor's coveralls instead of $1,000 suits, carried cleaning supplies instead of legal briefs, but his eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had once made him one of the city's most sought-after merger specialists. Tonight, that hidden expertise would matter more than anyone could imagine.